and you're listening to Mental Breakdown.
Flags and green flags. And so we're going to talk about that across kind of all relationships. So friendships, romantic relationships, family, even like work relationships, I would say too. So I'm curious what you guys have come up frequently in therapy, especially with like families, teens, couples.
I mean, initially, like what pops into my mind is overarching boundary violations.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that is an umbrella topic, an umbrella term, like so many different things within that. But I feel like that's a red flag that goes across a lot of those different types of relationships, where I do see that in a lot of times in session with like family members, relationships, early stage dating, friendships.
Yeah. What kind of boundary violations do you see? Because I think like sexual boundary violations, like cheating, sexting, you know, things like that, where it's like there very much is like, especially in like a romantic relationship, of I'm stepping out of the relationship and injuring the secure connection. But I know there's other ones too.
Yeah, I mean that is one that shows up. I think communication boundary violations. I mean, with like family, or even just like certain people that maybe you are putting some distance between or needing some space, and that's not really being respected. I don't know, my there's so many, but I feel like they need to like come with me as people talking.
Yeah. What about Darcy, Lucy? What do you guys normally see, or what are common themes or patterns?
I mean, I think I see it a lot. I think especially when we're talking about like my adolescent clients, like especially when we're talking about, especially with my females, I think there are not a lot of boundaries within their friendships. And I think a lot of times you have to pay attention to those small boundary violations that I think happen consistently that ultimately impact relationships. Like, and like, I think kind of like what Adia was talking about, like the communication ones, like interrupting people or like dominating conversations or like making rude comments or being passive aggressive. I think like those are common boundary violations that I see in a lot of my teenage friendships, that are things that we talk about pretty consistently because they don't seem so overt and huge, but over time, I think they really impact people's abilities to have healthy relationships and have trusting relationships with their friends. So I think I spend a lot of time talking about those little things in relationships that add up.
Well, and I love that, because I feel like those can go unnoticed, or, you know, it's not like they cheated on me or they were physically abusive or, you know, stole something. So like, it's not a big deal, right? Like I feel like people justify it or normalize it a lot when they still are boundary violations that are red flags.
And I think people, like, we tend to excuse them.
Yeah.
Because they're not bigger. And we're just like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. Like, it's something I'll just deal with. But then I think they forget, like, how much resentment can build up over time if somebody continues to treat them that way.
Yeah. Well, and when you were saying that, Lucy, I think we were talking about it in supervision, about people giving out like phone numbers or like private information on like social media, especially with teens, where it's like, let me put this girl's phone number out there so now everybody has it. And like that's, you know, an example of like that boundary violation too, or that red flag.
Yeah, I was different, but I was thinking about boundary violations with parents. And that might be like adults with their parents, and how, you know, like if your parent lacks that emotional maturity, a lot of times parents can invade those boundaries in many different ways, you know, whether that's just not respecting that adult child's choices, right? Or trying to make decisions for them. All of that, I'm sure. I feel like I see that a lot with my adult clients, struggling with their relationship with their emotionally immature parent.
I have an example, if you guys want an example.
Okay.
So prior to my mom's passing, I was like, Mom, I don't want to talk about politics. Like, plain and simple. Like, agree to disagree. I don't want to talk about it. And what did she do? Every time we got together, would talk about politics. And I would be like, Mom, I don't want to talk about politics, right? And it's not like life or death or anything like that, but it was that, like, do I matter to you? Because I keep telling you I don't want to talk about this, and yet you disregard my request. And it was like dumb stuff too. It wasn't even like, oh, did you hear about this big thing? It's like, Mom, like, just stop. So I think things like that, and I think that's a small example, but I do think it can be bigger if it's like maybe they don't agree with like who their adult child is dating, or if they like leave a religion or make a decision, and then it's like they're, you know, crossing boundaries with the way that they talk to them, the way that they treat them, or like their loved ones. So yeah, that was my example.
Yeah, I think that's a really common one.
For sure. Yeah, that's one I see a lot where it's like politics, I think like family relationships, just topics that are more pain point for people trying to set boundaries with their family, like clients trying to set boundaries with a family member or a relationship or somebody, and it just gets bulldozed.
Yeah.
And that is a violation. Again, it's like one of those ones that feels less, like it's a little bit, it's not as like in your face as some of the bigger ones, but it's still a violation. It's still crossing that line.
Well, and I think for me, like if I were talking to a client and they were describing this, I would be curious of like, okay, well, like why do they keep crossing it? Do you know why they keep crossing it? Is it to try to understand your point of view? Because I do feel like if it's, you know, I want to have an open-minded conversation, I'm curious, I want to learn, versus you're wrong, this is how it should be, I don't want to hear your point of view, I don't want to hear your boundaries. I feel like those are two very different things where, you know, sometimes especially with like parents of teens or even adults, it's like there might be, we're going to step over the boundary, but again, is it from that open-minded, I want to learn, I want to understand, versus the other? Not that it changes the boundary violation, but it might change the outcome. I do find with teens, you know, I will frequently tell parents because, you know, teens do some like wild stuff sometimes. I mean, we've all been there. Where I think for Darcy and I, there's just no documentation of it when we were kids because social media wasn't around because, you know.
That's when life was good.
Right? We weren't tracked. There was no social media. There's no record of anything that we did. But I will tell parents, like, especially if they're struggling between, you know, I need to enforce a boundary, but I don't want to make my kid mad. It's like, okay, but you have to pick between their safety and their happiness. You have to pick their safety. And I think a lot of times parents don't even approach it in that way. And so then when they do come at their kids, it does feel like a boundary violation or a red flag or toxic or things like that, when really it isn't. Yeah. I'm curious, in couples therapy, what are some other maybe boundary violations or red flags? Like maybe even like things that like partners have said without disclosing any client information or confidential information, but.
Well, one that kind of immediately comes to my mind is, I think like belittling somebody disguised as this is my sense of humor or I'm just really sarcastic. I've seen that sometimes where like, yeah, there is like that line where it's like play, you know, like there's a level of like play, bullying, maybe that's not a great term to use, in the relationship of like teasing each other that I think is okay and healthy and normal. And then there is kind of that line where it shifts into maybe this is actually like you're saying offensive things, or you're belittling someone, or you're talking to them condescending, and it's just dismissed as, well, that's just how I am. That's just my humor. That's, you know what I mean? I feel like that one, it has to be aligned. And if it's not, that's where maybe like that discrepancy comes up.
Yeah. Or even like invalidating, like especially if a partner's sharing how they feel and the other partner like can't show empathy or acknowledge the pain that they've caused. If it's like, well, I didn't do that, that's not what I meant. It's like, okay, but you still hurt them. Like, can you acknowledge the hurt and the pain? And I feel like if partners can't do that, that is something that I'm tracking of like, okay, is this a red flag, or is there something else? Like, is there a defensiveness? Is there underlying hurt that we need to address? But I find like if there just is this pattern of, you know, one partner dismissing the other partner's pain, that's a red flag.
I agree. I think too, like one of the biggest ones for me, I think that I struggle with in my couples sessions is when I'm paying attention to someone who isn't listening to their partner. You're just listening to respond. And so like there's no like what you're kind of talking about, Manon, like there can't be any validation or any understanding if you're unwilling to even take a moment outside of yourself and just sit there and listen to what's being said, as opposed to formulating your response after the first 3 words. So that's a pattern that I try very hard to pay attention to and try to call out immediately, because I feel like those conversations don't progress or don't move forward because you're always dealing with one person who's feeling like they're unheard the entire time. Yeah. And so I try very hard to kind of look at that pattern of behavior, because to me that shows me that there's probably even more boundary violations going on in that relationship that we may not be seeing.
Yeah. And I think along that same line, if like, let's say there's one, if they're both listening to respond instead of hear and understand, I think another red flag kind of on the opposite side is if a partner like isn't communicating what they are really thinking or feeling, and it's bottling up, and then they like come into therapy and it's like, let me just unleash on my partner even though I've had all this opportunity to talk about it. That's also a red flag, I feel like. And I think there's a lot to be explored as to like, why aren't you communicating? What happens when you communicate? But there is kind of a small percentage where people that do that, not everybody that does it, but there's a small percentage where it's like, okay, this is like a strategic move that you're doing to kind of like utilize therapy as a stage to just put your partner on blast. And that's not what therapy is all the time.
Yeah. And I think we have to figure that out, right? Which is like, is that what you're doing? Or like you have those couples or you have a client who will say like, this is the only place I feel safe enough to say this. I feel like if I say this at home, like my partner's going to blow up on me, or this conversation's not going to go anywhere. I'm not going to be heard. So I don't say anything purposely because I feel like I need the support from another person. And so part of like our responsibility again in that situation is to figure out like what the situation is and why this person's only choosing to talk about things in the sessions.
And then creating that safety. It might even be going back to basics. It might be talking about communication skills, healthy boundaries, structure, things like that. And that's more of the majority of, I think, what we get for couples in terms of like, it doesn't feel emotionally safe to bring it up. I don't know how my partner's going to hear it. I want to share it with a third party that's neutral and is fighting for the relationship.
On the opposite end of that, I think about the boundary violation of people who are just very confrontational and will bring things up at inappropriate times, whether that's your a family member or your partner, right? Whoever it may be. And I think there is something to be said. I've been even trying to think about this with my own family. Like my dad's side of the family is very Italian and they're very confrontational all the time. And trying to balance like that cultural aspect of like, this is how they are, how they've been for so long, and try not to shame them for it, but also here are appropriate times to have these conversations and here are inappropriate times to have these types of conversations. And I see that a lot with couples, honestly, and not even just couples, but friendships, work relationships, right? Like knowing
not here.
There's not here, never here, never here. But there's a time and a place for certain conversations. And I think that's also just like a big learning curve if you come from a home that is very confrontational, is trying to learn how to balance that. Like, okay, when is it okay to have certain conversations? And that's not just in the moment when you feel it all the time. Sometimes you need to be mindful of when you're initiating and having those conversations, and not only just out of respect for the other person, but you're far more likely to get what you want out of that conversation if you are mindful of the timing and when you're trying to have that conversation.
And like you said, how you're having that conversation, because if it's confrontational, it's going to put that other person kind of on the defense. versus, and we talk about this all the time in couples therapy or family therapy, like, can you dip down into the deeper emotion, the vulnerability, and like come at it from that place? Because it is easier to then lean into that emotion or that need versus like the confrontational, the conflict, things like that.
Yeah. I do feel like in couples, I see that a lot where, especially if there's been an injury, the vulnerable or injured person will feel something. And in that moment, they feel like they need to act on it. And let's say that their partner is in a meeting or at work, or doing something like, and then they just so desperately feel like they need to say it and get it off their chest and communicate it. But then it doesn't land well, right? Because that person on the receiving end is not available for it in that moment, or they're not available for it in a way where they're going to be able to meet your needs, hear you out, right? And then it leads us to be in that, negative feedback loop where now the person's disappointed, right? And so it is really important to be mindful of that timing.
Well, and I think like that goes into delayed gratification and like self-regulation. And so if clients don't have that ability to delay gratification, that need to communicate right then and there, and can't regulate their own emotions in a healthy way, those are also red flags.
Totally. And I feel like the other side of that would be the opposite, where like maybe the regulation isn't causing you, or the lack of regulation isn't causing the person to want to go and explode on their partner or initiate this conversation, but maybe that triggers them to pull back. Silent treatment, I feel like, is something I've seen with like family relationship red flags and romantic relationship red flags. I mean, truthfully, friendships too. Yeah. I feel like clinically that shows up a lot with like relationships and family dynamics that are that idea of if this isn't going the way that I want, or I'm having like an emotional response, I'm just going to like remove my communication with you. And it's almost like used as punishment for the other person. Yeah.
I'm going to take my ball and go home because I'm not getting my way. That's kind of how I talk about it with clients. Like, so you didn't get your way, so you withdrew. And sometimes clients need that. Like, they need maybe like the 5-10 minutes to kind of like soothe, figure it out. But I think what you're talking about is more of the concern of like, if it's just like, I'm mad at you and I'm going to show you how mad at you I am because I'm going to like remove your access to me.
Totally. And because absolutely, I'm a big supporter of take the time that you need, and
but
if you need a timeout, right? But like plan for that. Let your partner know what you need. Come up with an agreement that feels good for both of you, where it's like, okay, we're pausing this conversation. Are we coming back in an hour? Are we coming back once the kids are asleep? Like, what does that look like? But yeah, I'm totally talking more about that, what you had just said, where it's like, no, like this didn't go my way, and now I'm stonewalling you. I'm removing my affection. Maybe I'm like throwing passive aggressive remarks, or I'm
gonna pretend you don't exist because I'm so pissed off. So I'm gonna like ice you out.
Silent treatment. Yep.
Yeah. Do you guys watch, or have you watched The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives?
I haven't.
Yeah. So that is like a great. First of all, they need to hire me to be the therapist on the show. They need it really bad. But it is like a great example of so many of these things that we're talking about. One thing I noticed with that group of women, and a boundary that they all cross, is they overly invest themselves in each other's problems, right? And that is a boundary violation within itself. Like being overly invested in your friends' relationships, problems, whatever it is. It's important to care about your friends and to be there for them. But if you're involving yourself in your friends' problems so much to the extent that you're dysregulated about it, you are putting way too much. You're crossing that boundary, right? Like you're doing too much, and it's a boundary violation to do that. People, adults get to make choices for themselves, and your friend can choose to be in an unhealthy relationship, and you can support them and not necessarily be happy about it, but you also don't have the right to tell them what to do and to be upset with them or angry with them if they choose to not leave that person, right? That's just not your place. You know, I think we're talking different if there's physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, right? Like, but at the end of the day, we really do have to respect people's autonomy, and not doing that is a boundary violation.
Yeah. Well, and I think just kind of piggybacking on that for a minute, because like in therapy, like we might have clients that are telling us about a relationship that we clinically understand is not a healthy relationship for the client, based on whether like infidelity, substance abuse, dishonesty, boundary violations, like red flags, things like that. And even as therapists, we're not going to tell the client, like, here's what you should do. Like, here's what you have to do. Like, you can't be in that relationship. It's not our decision to make. But I do think like with friends, sometimes it's like, oh, but I can do that because we're friends. And it's like, you still can't do that. You can express the concerns or like your worry about that person, but at the end of the day, they get to make their own decision. And, you know, as therapists, even if a client comes in and is telling us that they're being physically abused by their partner, as an adult, we can't do shit about it because they're an adult and they're making that decision to stay. Difference if it's a kid, but, you know, then we would talk about like, let's talk about red flags and let's talk about healthy behaviors and safety planning and things like that. So, And Lucy, when you submit your application to that TV show, I think you should just put it for the whole practice.
Yeah, right.
Not Darcy?
There's too much. I mean, I think when Lucy's talking about it, she's talking about it very lovely. But, like, I feel like when she's talking about it, like, to me, like, that's what I feel like I see in a lot of, like, which is hard, because, like, I see that in a lot of my teenage girls. So it's
Totally.
It's all, like, when she's talking about the investment. Like, that's the part I worry about. Like, I tell my girls all the time, like, everybody does not deserve access to you, because I think people then blackmail you emotionally. Like, that's what that is. And so, like, when Lucy brought that up, I was just like, that's all that is for them. And they're so invested because they're like, what can I take from your pain to use against you in the future so that I can feel better about myself? And like, that's such a struggle, I think, in a lot of relationships, which is why I tell people, like, not everybody deserves full access to you and deserves to know your workings of like your life and what you're going through, because you can't always trust what someone's going to do with that information.
Yes.
I
love that.
That is so true. Go ahead, Adia.
I was gonna say, I feel like that is like that balance is definitely can be that red flag in relationships, where it's like, you know, we talk about, I feel like in couples therapy, like vaulting information sometimes, and it's not like don't let people in or don't tell trusted people when you're going through things or you need to talk through something. But I do think where it becomes that red flag is, are you sharing like every intimate detail with everybody, or you're going in every argument you have with your spouse, you're going and telling your mom, or, you know, things like that, where it's like, maybe that's not actually appropriate or helpful. And I think it's really hard then for those people, say you stay together or you make up,
now
or
what?
Yeah, it's really hard for those people to have that switch of like, okay, now I know all this information and I have this image and this picture, and I have to like switch back into support mode. I feel like that's really challenging for people.
Yeah. I had a client like forever ago coin the term promiscuous oversharer. Like, here's all of my information. I'm just going to give it to everybody. And that's that red flag that you guys are talking about too, right? Giving access to everybody who you meet, all that like intimate details, the sacred details about the good, the bad, everything. Are there other red flags that come up?
I think there are also like red flags within ourselves as individuals, like lack of boundaries with yourself. I don't know exactly how to explain it, but I think about someone who, and maybe it's more of like a lack of emotional regulation or mindfulness, or like lacking those skills that are able to help regulate yourself. I just think about individuals that I see that are very impulsive, like they just act on their emotions pretty consistently, if not all the time. And in a way, I don't know why I'm viewing it that way, but it feels like a boundary violation within yourself, right? Like you're so impulsive that you just act on everything that you feel. and you're not able to have that boundary within yourself to protect yourself from making bad choices, saying things you shouldn't be saying, allowing yourself to become dysregulated over something that shouldn't be so dysregulating. Yeah.
And I do think, just kind of going off of that too, where I think when we have clients that are like that, we're also assessing for, okay, is there a mental health diagnosis that's connected to that impulsivity? Like, is that part of, let's say, anxiety or depression or ADHD? And because that is a piece of the puzzle of like, okay, we can work on some of that along with, let's work on building your window of tolerance so you don't have to be so dysregulated, but also putting kind of like information to it or a label to it as to why it's happening. And I think you're right, Lucy. It's, are you constantly doing things that go against your own like wants and needs and values? So then you're acting out of alignment with what you want and need. And what are you doing to change it?
Yeah. And just allowing, and maybe that's like the lack of boundaries, is allowing people to have so much power and control over how you feel, the choices that you make, how you feel about yourself. And that feels like a boundary that you're not having with that other person or whoever it is, to be allowing them to have so much control and power over you. I was thinking about a specific example where, like when you're having to, if you're a step parent, right, and you're having to maybe interact with, what would that be? The
bio mom?
The biological parent, right? Not the person you're in the relationship with, but the person that they're co-parenting with. That person is not happy about you being a step parent, right? And they're constantly, texting you, calling you, giving you a hard time about being in their child's life, right? Like kind of trying to work you up and get this reaction out of you, right? And when you're allowing them to even have your phone number, when you're allowing, obviously that depends, but like when you're allowing them to text you and call you and you're available to them, right? Like, where is that boundary?
Yeah.
A specific example I was thinking of too is like at a soccer game, right? When you're there, this co-parent is always trying to be confrontational with you at the soccer game, right? How can you create a boundary? Is that you sit in the middle of a bunch of people so that you're not so available to this person, right? Is it that you I don't know. That's the only really, I guess, tangible example or idea I have for them at a soccer game, right? But like, how can you make yourself not available to this person? Essentially, how can you implement a boundary to protect yourself from this person being able to dysregulate you, right? Or confront you or whatever it may be.
And what would that be like? What would it be like to set that boundary? Are there people that could help set the boundary? Like, could your partner set the boundary with their former partner? Like, could they intervene and have your back?
This one, okay, this is kind of like a different red flag topic, but one that was kind of coming to my mind, which I'm like, how has this not come up yet? I feel like the two terms we get a lot that are like overused, probably overused and misused quite a bit in like media. I like sure see that. And
is it gaslighting?
And gaslighting and love bombing. But I mean, those two I think are like very real red flags that are very much a thing. Sometimes like that term is thrown around, I feel like, but I like love bombing. Can we talk about that for a second? Because I feel like that's something that goes up a lot in dating, where it's like maybe that beginning stage, and I feel like that is something to look for of like red flags. Like if you are just starting to see someone, and you're getting like this, like over the top treatment, or like they are, the good morning text, the good night text, the you're so beautiful constantly, like right off the bat. Or there, those are kinds of things to question a little bit, where it's like, this person doesn't have, like, you guys haven't developed that relationship yet. They don't know you don't know them. Like, I'm thinking like early stage dating, right? And they're just like, showering you with all of the perfect words and the gifts and the dates. And it's like that, I feel like, is where my mind goes with what bombing is.
So
I don't know.
how would you distinguish between like love bombing and somebody that's like a Hufflepuff, right? That's just like golden retriever. Darcy, you haven't seen Harry Potter?
So you're talking like love,
like just like a good person that's just like, oh my gosh, like I'm just like in it and I'm in the feels and like I just want to show them like how special and like beautiful and whatever that they are.
Well, I think that that's part of the problem, right? Is that because people are so like, oh, you're love bombing me. I feel like I have these conversations with men and they're like, I don't even feel like I can court a lady in the right way because like I don't want her to like overreact. Like I think I told a dude, he was like, I got a girl's phone number. And he got her number on Saturday, and it was Wednesday when I saw him. He's like, I haven't messaged her yet, and I was like, why? And he was like, because I don't want to be overbearing. And I was like, who wants to wait till Wednesday to hear from somebody that you gave your number to? And so that's what he said. He was like, I'm terrified to like reach out.
See, he's a Hufflepuff.
Yes, to like be nice to her because he was like, I don't want her to think I'm overbearing or things like that. And I'm like, I feel like that's the stuff I think that worries me, that like, are we at a place in this world where like you can't be a gentleman and be chivalrous and that not be deemed negatively. Well, and that's the hard part.
I feel like that reminds me, I'm sure you guys have heard the term like simp. I feel like that kind of idea of like somebody like simping over somebody.
Okay, I don't know what that means. I'm going to be really honest. I don't know what that means. I don't.
It's like being a punk.
Yeah, like being like.
I'm like, super up on new terms.
I can't really describe it, but I'm definitely like. Yeah. Yes.
Thank you, Darcy. I'm like, I'm old, you guys. I need to be explained to what this means, okay? I know Riz and I know like other things that my child has told me.
I don't know what a Hufflepuff is, so there we go.
Adia understood, so you guys need to watch Harry Potter. It's different houses. I'm going to just explain for anybody listening. Hufflepuffs are very loyal and caring, and like think of like golden retriever energy. Like they just like love like unconditionally. They're there, they're solid, they're consistent, would do anything. Yeah. That's Hufflepuff energy.
I think that is also like even being mindful. Let's say they are like great golden retriever, perfect.
I love the face you made with that, Lucy. That was great.
Well, I just think, right, like there's some key words and things that you said that are so green flags and things to look for in a person, like consistency and respect and kindness and effort, right? And all these things. That doesn't though mean that they're love bombing. I think there's a total difference, right? Like someone can have all these qualities, being consistent, being respectful, being kind, being thoughtful, but that doesn't mean that they're telling you they love you after 2 weeks of being together, and they're trying to jump down your throat, and they're buying you expensive things, and they're, you know, doing all these. I think these qualities are so much more valuable and important to look for than these ones, right? And there's such a distinct difference.
Yeah, totally. Like I think like love bombing, and Lucy, I feel like you described that so well. Yeah. It's like over the top, where it's like
with an agenda.
Kindness, those things are all good. But, like you've gone on one date, or maybe you've just met, and they're texting you the next day. I've never met anyone like you. I'm like, this feels so different, and it's like over the top, or they're buying you expensive gifts, or like the I love you is flowing after the second date. It's like slowing down a little bit, because how realistic is that? And I feel like one of the patterns that I see quite a bit is after that, when it's like actual love bombing, is like after maybe that initial chase has been gotten. I don't even know, like grammar's not working for me today. After that like initial chasing period, then it turns, like the tides turn, and it's like I'm either love bombing or breadcrumbing, and you're getting like nothing from me. So again, that's something to look for, where it's like, is this consistent behavior? Are they kind? Are they, you know, all those things? Or is it like really high highs and really low lows, where maybe they're doing that for a period of time in the beginning, and then their energy completely switches up.
Well, and I think you're right. Like, now that they have that connection with you and like you're in, then are they changing and being more maybe like confrontational, avoidant, withdrawing, the breadcrumbing? Yeah.
Well, and for anyone who maybe doesn't know that is listening, right? Like what love bombing is they're trying to hook you in,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that then if they aren't a regulated, consistent person, they've already hooked you and now created this really high expectation that you're going to have for them. And so you're always going to be chasing that high that they gave you for the first bit of the relationship. But then if they're deciding to be avoidant, withdrawn, you know, play games,
Confrontational.
whatever their reason is, right? You're always holding them at this base of, well, this is how they were when we first started dating. I know this is their potential. I know they can treat me like this. And I think that's also a red flag to look at within yourself.
Yeah.
I've been there. Do you fall for love bombing? Right? Like,
and are you staying for the potential?
Right. And are you catching on to those red flags early on in a relationship, or are you allowing yourself to essentially like fall for them? That's also a red flag within yourself, I think, and a lack of boundaries that you have if you fall for that. Right?
Yeah. Well, and I have a whole conversation. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think we have a whole conversation, I think, about like what Lucy's talking about, because I wonder sometimes for us, like, do you find it's more difficult to like manage like addressing those kind of boundary violations within, like with the client when their boundary violations are with another person, or is it much more difficult to like help them manage the boundaries they have within themselves, right? Like the things they have in place to keep themselves safe, or the things they have in place to kind of keep them within relationships, right? Like all those things that I think it's kind of talking about, like, are these things that we do because we're searching for something, but ultimately it's not good and healthy for us.
Well, I think it all comes from the same place, and I could be wrong, so you guys can please jump in and tell me that. I think it all comes from that, like you said, Darcy, like what's missing, what's the underlying hurt or unmet need, or maybe even like negative belief about themselves that they feel like that's what they deserve or that's all they're worth, or they can't maintain the boundary, they're not good enough, or things like that. And it's like we can heal kind of like the individual wounds, the trauma, and that's going to expand to not only like the decisions they're making about themselves, but also what they're allowing other people to say and do around them.
Yeah.
But that's just my philosophy. But, you know, I love working with trauma. So anything I can brain spot or EMDR, I'm like, yes, like, let's do it. So.
No, but I love that you said that, because I feel like one of the things that comes to my mind is just how, like, our nervous systems are drawn to familiarity. And I think that's why those patterns and cycles are so hard to break. So, like, if you grew up in a family where love was inconsistent, or there was, you know, conditional encouragement or conditional I love yous, and it was taken away or used as punishment if you weren't doing exactly what, you know, whatever. That kind of pattern of up and down might be something that is reflected then later in adult relationships. And I feel like one of the other things that kind of comes to my mind, like Lucy, you were talking about, is just like that actual brain process that's happening. I'll sometimes talk about with clients if they're like in a situation like this, because I feel like to normalize it a little bit, like it feels obsessive and addicting sometimes, I think, to be in that pattern of like really high highs and then they pull away, and your brain literally is responding to that differently. I read an article about how thinking about like the dopamine system and like our reward system, when you're getting consistency, your dopamine actually doesn't open and flood the same way it does when you're like hoping for something and yearning for something, and then every so often they drop like a breadcrumb. Your dopamine is literally like flooded with all of the feel-good chemicals. It's like, oh, that's what I've been hoping for. And the inconsistency is actually way more reinforcing than the consistency, which sometimes feels really confusing, because it's like, why does that feel so good when they give me this little bit and I'm holding on to this? Do you know what I mean?
That's why slot machines in like Vegas make the most money, because they do the intermittent rewards. So you get that little dopamine hit, even if it's like Granted, I don't gamble because I don't like to lose my money like that. But if I were, I would play like the penny slots or like the nickel slots like a grandma, and I'm all about it. But like, oh, I won like 5 cents. Like, this is great. So let me just keep going.
No, but exactly,
Yeah.
it is that article. I like wish I knew where I read this, but it's the exact same process when why like gambling is so addicting for people. It's like,
Well, and the
because you're
breadcrumbing. Yeah.
constantly yearning. It's like, I don't know when this next thing is going to be. So you're hoping and you're hoping and you're hoping. And then they give you a little piece. And it's like your world opens up and you feel regulated and you're like, oh my gosh, this feels great. And it really is confusing, like the reality of the situation with how your brain is actually responding to it.
I also think a lot of people who have an anxious attachment style sometimes lack those boundaries where maybe they have these unrealistic expectations of a partner, right? Like they maybe have an expectation that their partner should be utterly available to them, that they should be continuously and constantly showering them with love and affection, right? That they have maybe these more societal standards for their partner that aren't fitting to everybody, right? And I think for those people who are very anxious, it doesn't come from a malicious place, but you have unrealistic expectations for a relationship that aren't healthy expectations.
Well,
right?
Am
And
I
that's
safe? Are we safe?
Right, exactly. And I think when there have been a lot of people like that I have worked with that don't understand why they can't maintain a healthy relationship or connection, secure attachment with someone, and not recognizing their own contribution to the dysfunction because they have these unrealistic or very anxiously driven expectations from a partner that will probably drive someone away from them, right?
Well, and I think that goes back to Darcy's question, because I think so much of that, like, we can do work with the individual on healing what caused the anxious attachment, because usually that's like a childhood wound or some other trauma. Let's heal that so that you're feeling secure within yourself and you're feeling good about you, where you don't need that external validation or need for like constant reassurance, because like you're already giving it to yourself. Yeah. Can we touch on gaslighting? Because I know we touched on love bombing. Can we talk a little bit? And we might have to do another episode just on like one on love bombing, one on gaslighting, and moving on. But I think just to touch on that, so anybody that's listening, they might be like, why aren't they talking about this? So let's just kind of talk about what that is. How do we see it? How do we define it? How do we kind of track it? And I can start if you guys want me to. I just feel like I talk all the time, so I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't want to just like dominate the whole episode. But I think I look at gaslighting as intentional psychological and emotional manipulation to make a person feel like they are not good enough, they're bad, they're not right. And it's a way to like Lucy, you talked about love bombing as like hooking the person and getting them in. Gaslighting to me feels like, okay, now let me condition you to be compliant and to be small. Like to be, you know, all of that. What were you going to say, Adia?
No, I was just like, yep.
Okay.
I feel like one of the things that comes to my mind is like with gaslighting, I think a lot of like blame shifting happens. And a lot of the manipulation that I see is like, I guess the aftermath more so of that is this utter confusion about like, where is my baseline? Like, where is my truth? Like, can I trust myself?
Like reality questioning.
Yeah. Like, you know, like if you feel it, you're having a feeling about something, or maybe you're having an intuition about something, or you bring up a conversation with your partner and they flip the script and they gaslight you, and you kind of start like, it's almost like, am I crazy? Like, you start losing trust with that
within
inner guidance of like your own, I don't know, your own.
Well, you don't trust yourself. And I think even like leading into that, then it goes deeper into, again, more negative self-beliefs about yourself. So then it's like, well, I'm not even going to question what they're saying because I'm the problem. I'm the bad guy. I can't get it right. There's something wrong with me. There's something bad with me. And I would not be able to get anybody else because I'm so bad and broken. And so it's like that. How do I keep you stuck in this relationship?
Yeah.
And it is like, I tell this to clients, like, it is not a normal experience to feel confused constantly or frequently in your relationship when you're communicating with someone. When you have a healthy and secure relationship, you are not leaving those conversations feeling mind
fucked. You can say it.
You're not leaving feeling like, what the heck just happened? I'm confused. And if you are feeling a continuous sense of confusion in your relationship, especially during conflict, you're probably being gaslit.
Yeah, Lucy, I love that you said that, because mindfucked is the perfect way to describe it. And where it's like, maybe you go in and you're like, hey, this is something that's really important to me, or like, I'm presenting you with some evidence that don't quite sit right, and like, let's have a conversation. And then somehow the script gets flipped on, and that's where like I talk about the blame shifting.
Yeah, like,
and
that
then
didn't happen.
Right. And like, you as this person initiating the initial conversation, ends up being the one who's maybe like apologizing or comforting this other person, and then you leave and you're like, wait, how did that just take the turn that it did? My agenda got completely detoured, and now, I don't even know where to leave this, but I just feel confused, and maybe like I'm in the wrong. I feel like those are all really good, really telltale signs that gaslighting is happening.
And deflecting is a little bit different than gaslighting, right? Like, when an example is, you're telling someone like, hey, when you did this on Friday, it made me feel like this, and they go, it wasn't on Friday, it was on Thursday.
Yeah.
Okay. Right? Like, now they're trying to kind of either dysregulate you, take you out of your
story,
kind of thought, right? Kind of like, I almost feel like, in a way too, depending on the person, sometimes people deflect and gaslight unintentionally and don't recognize or know what they're doing. But sometimes there are those people that do know what they're doing, right? And they have an intention behind the deflecting, right? Which is to either throw off your train of thought, dysregulate you,
prove that you're wrong from, it wasn't Friday, it was Thursday.
Prove that you're wrong, right? And just focused on, and when I experience that with couples, I will often be like, doesn't matter. Like, I will jump in and interrupt that conversation, because that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether it happened on Thursday or on a Friday, right? And by responding that way to your partner, you're almost completely invalidating what they're saying before they even get the chance to finish their sentence, by shifting what it's actually about to this minimal detail that really doesn't matter.
And I do think that there are some presenting concerns or diagnoses that struggle with that, and not from like a gaslighting manipulative way, but I think if somebody is really anxious or even like neurodiverse, they might get stuck in like kind of like those concrete details of like, no, I need to have it correct so that I can keep moving in the story. But I think what we're talking about is like, what's the intention behind it? Is the intention behind it to come together and like problem solve, or is it to make you feel crazy and wrong and it's your fault? So,
and I think you can also tell, because I do think you're absolutely right, Manon. I think it absolutely depends on the intention and the person. You can almost tell, right? Like, I will have clients where maybe it is an important piece of information that the person got wrong, and that partner will maybe gently say like, hey, that actually happened, like, it was Thursday, not Friday, right? And not in a way, but there is also a different way of saying it where it's like, no, it wasn't, it was on Thursday, right? And it's almost like, let's get into this back and forth so I can stop you from being able to say what you actually want to say, and we can just get to this dialogue where then I don't have to take accountability.
Well, it makes me think of like, and I don't want to make this political at all, but like, you guys have seen all of this on social media with like the Epstein files and things like that, where, there are all these posts on social media of like, okay, stop talking about, the tariffs, or, this like war you want to start, or the ballroom, like, release the files, right? Like, I'm going to like do all of your attention over here and deflect, so we're not talking about this. And like, offenders will do that, like sex offenders will do that a lot, domestic violence offenders, people that are gaslighting will do that a lot, where it's, again, let me nitpick the details over here so we're not talking about the real issue. Versus, wait, what are we talking about? I thought that we had that conversation Thursday, and I'm trying to understand.
right? Like it feels so different, like the intentionality behind it.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Well, and I think too, like, is it an ongoing pattern? Because there could be conversations, like there might be a point where some of this is happening where it's like, it didn't happen that way. Like, I really don't know what you're talking about. Like, I don't remember it that way. Where like one specific incident isn't going to determine like that person is gaslighting or anything like that. It might just be a miscommunication versus is it an ongoing pattern that keeps getting like worse and worse and worse. And again, how is the person who's being gaslit feeling about themselves?
Yeah, I love that you said that. I feel like that's a conversation I have with clients a lot who are like just starting to date or maybe like, you know, whatever. Is everybody has bad days. And so like a one-off where you know, someone has a bad day or maybe they react a certain way isn't necessarily like a red flag. I think that's just like part of being human.
Yeah.
But I always say like, look at the patterns. Is this something that over time like is consistent that they're doing? Is this a one-off? And pay attention to how you feel in those situations and how your body is responding and how your nervous system is responding.
Well, and how are they repairing? So if it is a one-off, how are you guys coming back together, whether it's a romantic relationship, a friendship, family relationship, how are you guys coming back together and then repairing whatever that conflict was? Because people that do gaslight don't come back and say, you know what, babe, I'm so sorry. Like, you were right. Like, I was in the wrong. They might on like small things, like I should have let you order the pepperoni pizza. Instead, I made you do this, but not about the big things that matter.
Or they only come back when they're fearful of losing you and they are forced to apologize, because if they don't, you're not going to stay.
And then it's probably going to be met with the love bombing, right? Here's this really expensive gift, or I booked us a trip, or I booked you a massage, or things like that. Like, I'm going to come in this big grand way so that I can get you back in.
And if anyone is interested, like, you can look up the cycle of abuse, the cycle of domestic violence, and that is pretty exactly what we just explained is that cycle.
Yeah, and so for people who are listening, it starts with like tension building, where things start to feel a little bit off. It escalates to the abuse, and then the honeymoon phase, which is like gift giving, apologizing. I'm going to do everything. It's going to be different. But then it just keeps going and going and going, and it happens quicker and quicker. And what tends to happen is the honeymoon phase gets dropped. So then it's just tension building and abuse.